All right, welcome back into the 1-0 Sports Show. Again, I'm Thomas Fitch, joined alongside Robert Trevino. And now joining us, the first guest of the year is Derek Duke, writer for Heartland Sports. He's been a big fan of the 1-0 Sports brand since we've gotten started. So great to have you on, Derek.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me on.
All right, so we're going to go down all the Big 12 teams and just kind of have a couple questions. One thing for every team that we go through, we'll do a little word association game. So kind of the first word or phrase that you think of for the team for the season when I say their name. So first team, word association, Kansas.
Believe. I think if you're a Kansas fan, you have to believe, and we really wanted just to see some sort of light at the end of the tunnel here. It's been painful since 2009 for them. They've had five different head coaches and haven't made a bowl game since 2008. And so it's just been very painful. So I think you have to believe if you're a Kansas fan.
Yeah, what can Les Miles do to right the ship, or can he do anything to right the ship there?
I think the first question you have to ask about Kansas is just, is Les there for the long haul? If he is there for the long haul, the steps he's going to take are going to be a little bit more drastic. But if he's not there, then he's going to have to take big steps quickly. So what I'll say about Les is I cover a little bit of recruiting. So anytime I talk to a kid and the fact that they're actually bringing up Kansas to me, and I'm not having to ask for Kansas, I think that's already one step in the right direction. And the fact that these kids are talking about Kansas with a very positive attitude, it's just not another offer anymore. People are actually considering Kansas as, some of their top 5, top 10 schools. So that's a big deal for them. And what I need to see from them is just to be more competitive in football games. For me, that's the first step. No more getting blown out by 3 touchdowns anymore.
Yeah. Robert, you want to move on to the next team?
Yeah, so moving to the Little Apple and their in-state rival, Kansas State. What's the first word that comes to mind when you think of the Wildcats?
I went with the phrase here, and I put sometimes change is good. Bill Snyder was one of the best coaches there of all time. There's no doubt about that. What he did at Kansas State is probably considered his miracle work. Led them to 2 Big 12 titles during his tenure, and then even came back out of retirement to fix the whole Ron Prince debacle from 06 to 08. So I think sometimes change is good, and you're going to see a new voice and a new face with Chris Kleiman.
So expanding on that change, how long does it take Kansas State to replace Bill Snyder, or can they do that at all?
When your name's on the stadium, I don't think you can ever be replaced. It's still Bill Snyder Family Stadium. So all I can ask for Chris Kleiman is to make positive strides and get the program back up to speed with the rest of college football, because that place has just been like Fort Knox to try to get information from. And I think Chris Kleiman's starting to change that, allowing more media access and just more I guess light positivity being shined upon them. So.
All right, let's move on to a team that I know you love to cover, the Iowa State Cyclones. What's your word association for them?
It's going to be next. 2 words I got: next step. I think this program under Matt Campbell, they've experienced back-to-back bowl games, which doesn't have to happen often there. Had back-to-back 8-win seasons for the first time since the late 70s, and for the first time probably since the year 2000, they expect to be at a Big 12 championship game come December, which is big.
So Iowa State, finish this sentence. Iowa State will have a good season if
they can find some playmakers on offense outside of Brock Purdy. They got to replace 2 all Big 12 players in David Montgomery and Nakeem Butler, who they relied on so much last season. I think they have a stud in running back, freshman running back Breece Hall, but the wide receiver position is still a big issue. Maybe it's Michael Petaway, the Arkansas transfer, can be that guy, or maybe it's a collective effort from the group, but they need somebody to step up.
Now on the other side, Iowa State will have a disappointing season if what?
I probably just go opposite. If they can't find those playmakers outside of Brock Purdy, if they can't to get the offense going the next step, their defense is good enough to carry them, but it's not going to be good enough to carry them to a Big 12 championship game. They have to have some sort of offense outside their quarterback.
Yeah, and let's move over to the Mountaineers of West Virginia. What's the first word that comes to mind when you think of West Virginia?
Rebuild. They have so much to replace on offense and defense that it really, to be honest with you, it's not even funny.
So how do the Mountaineers go about replacing, obviously, Dana Holgorsen and Will Grier?
I don't think they can replace a quarterback like Will Grier. but they can replace a guy like Dana. Neil Brown's an excellent coach. He's turned around Troy. He had straight 10-win seasons there. It's no easy place to do it at a place like Troy, but he did. He was able to beat a few SEC teams on the road, which was pretty big. I think they'll be fine in the coaching department. With Will Grier, like I said, I don't think you can replace that. But, they do have Austin Kendall. But just outside of Will Grier, they lose their top 4 pass catchers from the season ago, and David Sills, Gary Jennings, Marcus Sims, and Trayvon Wesco. And those 4 combined for almost 3,000 yards and 31 touchdowns. So they have a lot to replace on offense.
Let's move to Oklahoma State. And, personally for me, first word that comes to mind when I think Oklahoma State is mullet. But what's the first word that comes to mind for you?
I learned another phrase here. So I went find and settle on a quarterback. Last season was just a wild roller coaster due to the bad defense and just very inconsistent quarterback play for them.
Yeah, and I kind of have a 2-part question here. A, can they pose any threat in the Big 12? And B, can Tylan Wallace do everything by himself so that they can pose a threat in the Big 12?
I'm an opposite guy, so I'll go with the B question first. I don't think Tylan Wallace can do it by himself.
Yeah.
I think he's a great player in his own right. Definitely one of the top 3 or 4 wide receivers, depending on who you ask in the conference. But as far as a threat to winning the Big 12, I don't think so. I still see him as the middle of the pack team. You mentioned Tylan Wallace at wide receiver. True Hubbard's an excellent running back, probably one of the best running back in the entire conference. But they've got to find out whether Drew Brown or Spencer Sanders can be the guy at quarterback to get them back on track. Defensively, I think they'll be a little bit better than last season. I like their secondary, but I still think they're going to struggle.
And now let's move over to Norman for the team everyone seems to be talking about this offseason. What's the first word or phrase comes to mind when you think of the Sooners?
One word, and that's defense. It's been an Achilles heel for years now for them. And to be honest with you, it's probably cost them at least a shot or 2 at the national title game, which is pretty big considering where their offense has been over the last few years.
Yeah, you get flashbacks to that game versus Georgia in the college football playoff national semifinal. So what are your expectations for Jalen Hurts coming in and transferring?
I mean, it's still positive. It's still great. Jalen Hurts is a guy. We know what kind of talent he has. Unfortunately, he kind of sit behind Tua Tagovailoa, who is probably going to be a Heisman winner this season. But I still think he's a lot of great attributes to him. I think Lincoln Riley is going to shine the spotlight on those attributes, and I think they're going to do the things that Jalen does very well. So I don't see the offense really dropping off that much. They have some question marks on the offensive line, losing 4 draft picks, but I think Bill Bedenbaugh is one of the best in the country when it comes to the offensive line. So I think the offense still will be fine, but defensively just so many question marks across the board.
Yeah, so Oklahoma, what do you think will need to happen for them to have a disappointing season? So I guess finish the sentence, Oklahoma has a bad season if
the defense stays the same. And I'll also throw in the offensive line doesn't gel. But for me, the defense, like I said, it's just a collective effort. They were pretty much dead last in just about every category you can imagine last season in defensive play. They just have to have some life, some kind of energy, and hopefully their new defensive coordinator, Alex Grinch, can bring some of that and maybe just get them in the top 100. I don't think that's so hard to ask if they could just get maybe a top 100 or a top 75 defense.
All right, let's move on to Robert Trevino, your hometown team, Texas Tech Red Raiders. Derek, what's your word association for them?
Well, with another phrase, and the only thing this was a tough one. The only thing I could think of was just a new era. Mm-hmm. No more Cliff Kingsbury, and now it's on to the Matt Wells era.
So they will have a good season if what happens?
I think they'll have a good season if they can play more consistent defense and run the football. Both of those things have been an area of weakness for years now. And I also want to say, and also keeping quarterback Alan Bowman healthy. He's the guy for me that could be a top 3 quarterback in the conference. And he's the difference for me between a possible 7-5, 8-4 type season for the Red Raiders, or if he's not healthy, it could be another 5-7 year for them.
Yeah. So you touched on that, but they have a bad season if. I'm assuming you're saying if Alan Bowman can't stay healthy.
Yeah, we saw that last season. And if they don't do it, they won't make a bowl game. He's by far the most important piece in the entire puzzle. We saw how different this team was last season without him. And to be honest with you, I personally feel like if he would have been healthy all last season, Cliff Kingsbury would probably still be on the sidelines there.
Yeah.
Yeah, now moving to TCU, what's the first word or phrase you can think of for the Horned Frogs?
Find a quarterback. It's pretty simple for them. Find a quarterback.
And so what does Gary Patterson have cooking up his sleeve, I guess you could say, this season, or does he have anything there at all?
Well, I hope he has good quarterback play up his sleeve because that's what they desperately need. We all know the defense will be good as long as he's roaming the sidelines there. But for over the last 3 years, quarterback play has really kept his teams from reaching their full potential, whether it was Kenny Hill from a couple years ago or Sean Robinson last season. They have everything in place to, I feel like, to compete for a conference title, except for the one big thing, which is obviously the quarterback position. And it's going to come down to Alex Delton or Max Duggan to be that guy. I think Duggan will take over at some point, but my question is it going to be too late by then? This could be a 9-win team with solid quarterback play, or a 6-6 team like they were last season with just bad quarterback play.
All right, let's move up I-35 from Austin and go to Baylor. What are you thinking of with Baylor?
My phrase for them was keep grinding. I think what Matt Rule has done in Waco has been remarkable, and this could be a big season for Baylor. If they could possibly be one of those dark horse contenders for a Big 12 title.
Just how important is this season for Matt Rule? I mean, I don't think anybody would go so far as to say he's on the hot seat. But, you look at 2 years ago, 1 or 2 win season, he's getting looks from the NFL, stays, gets to a bowl game last year, beats Vanderbilt. Now you have Charlie Brewer coming back. So how important is this as far as him making a statement?
It's huge, not only from Matt Rule's standpoint, but from a program standpoint. They went from 1-11 in 2017 to 7-6 last season with the bowl win, which is a huge turnaround. Now I feel like they have to take that next step and try to get to maybe 8 wins and play in that bigger bowl game, or even possibly contend for that Big 12 title berth. I still think they're a middle-of-the-pack team, but they have a good shot at being in the top 4 of the conference if things go right. And not to mention, Matt Rule's gotten all these looks from NFL teams and stuff like that. So if he does leave after this season, you want to see how the next coach can come in and step into a possibly better situation than what he did a couple years ago.
Right, and Baylor's going to be led by Charlie Brewer, who's looked impressive last season, but is he going to be enough to overcome another likely lackluster defense up there in Waco?
Well, first, I think he needs to worry about his offensive line protecting him because he's been running for his life the last 2 seasons. I think the defense will be better. Defensive coordinator Phil Snow has a pretty complex defense, and I think now the defense should have a great grasp of what they can do and what they need to do in that defense. Like I said before, I still think this is a 7-5, 8-4 type of team. But if they don't improve defensively, because they gave up way too many big plays last year, it could possibly be another 6-6 year for them because just, again, too many big plays on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, so let's actually move down to the final team, down I-35 to Austin, to Texas. What is the word association for the Longhorns?
This is probably my easiest one to do out of all these teams, and my word is going to be finish. And by finish, I mean finish football games. No more speed bumps. No more losing to Maryland. No more losing to Oklahoma State. They have to finish football games.
Yeah, so Texas will have a good overall season. And also, what is that good overall season going to be considered?
I think they have to get to at least 10 games if they want to get back to the Big 12 championship game. And that's really all you can ask for, to have a shot to win a Big 12 title just by reaching that game. And then hopefully from that, it can stem into something bigger, like maybe a playoff berth. But again, I just go back to finishing ball games. They cannot play up and down to their opponents anymore. They have to be the ones setting the tone for the football games, not for just a quarter or two, but for all 4 quarters across the board.
Yeah. And do you have any sort of concern with their defense, returning only 3 starters?
The defensive front, I think, could be a concern. I really like Keandre Coburn at the nose tackle spot. I think he can be a real big star for them. My biggest question mark for them probably is going to be mostly linebacker. But even then, I still think we're nitpicking a little bit. A lot of people nationally want to talk about that. But I think across the board, from top to bottom, this is probably the most complete team in the entire Big 12. So for me, it's just there's really no excuses for not winning a Big 12 title, or at least getting a shot to play for it once again this season.
Yeah, before we get to your predictions for the Big 12 title, let's get to a couple other predictions for the season. We'll start it off with who do you think will take home Freshman of the Year?
Boy, this one was tough, and I still don't have an answer to whether a redshirt freshman can win or not. I think they can. So I think Spencer Sanders, the quarterback from Oklahoma State, could be that guy. Obviously, he's still in a battle with Hawaii transfer Drew Brown, and neither guy saw the field last season, which was kind of weird for me. because Taylor Cornelius really struggled and was pretty up and down last season. So I think Spencer Sanders will get a shot. Probably going to see him next Friday against Oregon State when they're in their opener. But it's either him or, for me, I could see another guy like Max Duggan, the freshman quarterback from TCU. Alex Delton's going to be their guy going into week 1. But I have a hard time seeing him hold on to that job. So I think Max Duggan could be a guy that really steps in and brings that, really upticks their season, gets them really going where they should be in the right direction.
Yeah, and who do you think is going to take home Offensive Player of the Year this year?
I'm sure you all like this one. It's going to be Texas quarterback Sam Moser for me. Just the threat of the running and the passing in the red zone. He put up some monster numbers last season. May not have the rushing stats that he did last year with all those rushing touchdowns, but very obviously Tim Tebow-esque. That's the easy comparison everybody wants to make. And hey, Tim Tebow was a Heisman winner, so I don't see why Stan couldn't be in the Heisman contention as well.
Yeah, let's go to the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, a lot of people like to say that's not played in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Clearly, Georgia saw the opposite last year in the Sugar Bowl. But who do you think takes home Defensive Player of the Year?
Looking at Iowa State defensive end Jaquan Bailey, I think that was the pretty consensus pick across the board, although some people picked Kenneth Murray, the linebacker from Oklahoma at Big 12 Media Days. Not really sure what they saw there, but I'm going to Iowa State defensive end Jaquan Bailey. I think he's going to be a guy at the end of the year that we'll look at, and he's going to lead the entire conference probably in sacks.
All right, here's the ultimate prediction. Who do you think is going to take home the hardware? Who's going to win the Big 12 championship?
Well, this one's not going to be a popular choice for your podcast.
And we're unbiased here.
Unbiased.
Not really.
Until I'm proven, until we see otherwise, I have a hard time picking Oklahoma. Well, I do think Texas is probably the most balanced team across the board from offense to defense out of the entire Big 12. I have to go Oklahoma. I mean, 4 straight Big 12 titles. You have to be just amazed by what they've done under Lincoln Riley. Probably the best offensive mind in the entire country under Lincoln. There's a reason everybody wants a piece of him, or for them to be for them to hire him away from somebody. I know the Cowboys were really interested in possibly taking him away. So were the Browns, but until somebody proves me otherwise, it's got to be Oklahoma. Now, I still think Oklahoma and Texas will have their rematch once again this season. It could go either way. But right now I have to go Oklahoma just because of their schedule and how easy their path is to really get there.
Yeah, how close do you think Iowa State will be to making the Big 12 championship? Are they a game back, or do you think it's a little further than that?
I think it's a game back. I think when we talk about the Big 12 from top to bottom, there's their little sections, and I think Oklahoma, Texas are in that top tier when we're looking at 1-2. And I think there's just a small little gap, maybe that game gap, and then there's Iowa State, and then from there I think there's even a little smaller gap from Iowa State on down to the spots 5 through 7 or 5 through 8, depending on who you ask. But Iowa State's right there. They're defensively, I think they have the best defense in the entire conference. Then again, I don't think that's something that can carry in the Big 12 like it maybe could in an SEC or Big 10. But they just have to get going offensively. Offensively, they've been pretty mediocre the last 2 years, even with guys like David Montgomery and Hakeem Butler. But they just have to find some playmakers outside of Brock Purdy.
All right, well, Derek, thanks for joining us. First guest of the 1-0 Sports Show. When we come back, Robert and I are going to have all of your game day predictions for Week 1 of college football.